Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Game gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Game gremlins on the scene.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says press a box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Grumps says welcome one, welcome all.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcoming guys.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. 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 Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next room.
Tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says who's ready to Wordle.
Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. T.
Grumps says at Ruby Roo higher.
Thanks for the follow.
Mild says table.
Gaga Grumps says hi there Ruby, how goes it? Gaga Grumps says thanks for following.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says my alt in the house. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Mild says table.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grump says your word starting
We
with T,
would be
please, my
honored
lord.
if you would join us.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grump says, is it still table?
Mild says table.
Mild says yes.
Gaga Grump says thanks for doing your daily heart th best gooner.
The best gooner says hello.
Grump says at X set A1 Toodle is 6 letters.
Gaga Grump says table you got.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thanks for the follow.
Mild says Bray.
Oscar says drain.
Grump says it Millie higher. My alt says break, please.
Gaga Grump says we have a yellow A and E in need of homes.
Benjamin is in the house.
Oscar says dream.
We would be honored
Gaga
if you
Grump
would join
says Oscar
us.
in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Sarum says gamey.
We would be honored if you would
Gaga
join
Grump
us.
says dream fits.
Sarum says cream.
Gaga Grump says we end in ream.
Mild says cream. Oscar says cream.
Benjamin is in the house.
19 Jews 97 says cream.
My alt says cream.
Benjamin is in the house.
The creative one says cream.
Thanks for the
My
follow.
alt says cream.
Gaga Grump says 19J in
Thanks
the house
for the
thanks for
follow.
doing your daily heart. Gaga Grump says Sarum in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grump says it Elisa higher.
Good game.
Gaga
Fireworks for
Grump says
Gaga.
cream to start the day with fireworks.
It's a performance night. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a
Gaga
happy
Grump
place.
says, are you ready?
Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grump says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Sarum says I was first.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay.
Gaga Grump says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grump says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for.
I guessed it wrong, you guessed it right.
Grumps says it Crystal morning.
Saren says, yeah, I get text to speech.
Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me thrive.
Crystal says, at Grumps morning.
Same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Stain says hi wall.
Stain says, hope you're doing good.
Grumps says it Stain higher.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up my alt. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal in the house.
Grumps says it Twins vibes why.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says it Minim higher.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. K.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Saren says crit.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun. Tap and don't stop, like a thun. Who will be crowned like a thun? Gremlin renowned, like a thun. Fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts be flying like a thun. Gremlins defying.
Jimmy says, I'm too tired to tap to try get the crown, but he'll still double them.
Grumps says that Emily has been spun.
Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says that Nathan likes Gars higher.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with K please Stain. Gaga Grumps says Crystal with all the gifts.
Jellin1 says hi.
Grumps says that Jimmy that's what coffee is for.
Stain says karma.
Grump says at Geolin 1 higher.
Gaga Grumps says karma you got.
Jelen1 says at Logan FIRKN.11.
Jimmy says at Grumps I do drink coffee. It doesn't keep my awake, makes me fall asleep.
Sarim says right.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow R in need of a home.
Mild says Blair.
Stain says rough.
My alt says Noah. Gaga Grumps says Jimmy in the house.
Jimmy says brown.
Sarim says right.
Gaga Grumps says no A for Blair.
Sarim says right.
Gaga Grumps says rough works.
Jimmy says brown.
Mild says brown.
Sarim says brown.
Grump says at Jimmy that's the coffee telling you it needs more.
DVP says crown.
Mild says brown.
Jimmy says brown.
Mild says brown.
Jimmy says at Grumps Law.
Mild says at .ssuguru_get yes.
Sarim says rigor. Sarim says riga.
Gaga Grumps says brown works.
Jimmy says order.
Gaga Grumps says I think we have an
Crystal says color.
Gaga Grumps says R can't be there for order.
Crystal says not colour, not second.
Jimmy says at Dada and Grumps I didn't realize law.
Gaga Grumps says can't be porch.
Stain says score.
Stain says NVM.
Gaga Grumps says can't be glory.
Says Otter.
Gaga Grumps says won't be Oreos for 2 reasons. Gaga Grumps says Otter works in tests for
Jimmy says at Dada and Grumps BC Oreos is plural and BC there can't go there.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says and is the word
Good
GG's
game.
for Ellie.
Good game. Good game.
Grumps says it Jimmy and because Brown name.
Good game. Good game.
It's playtime!
Gaga Grumps says 3 reasons then Jimmy. My second biggest Brandon.
Don't let her lose!
Jimmy says at Grumps, yes.
Don't let him push yours!
Jimmy says at Grumps, so 3 reasons.
Stickers fly!
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps says that Jimmy we shall start a Wordle police.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says do the for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gremlins, let's go!
Good game.
Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says we don't pay easy.
Good game. Good game.
Grumps says it user 191128282 out of here.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says corgi butt.
Shout! It's cool!
Gaga Grumps says with a quick segue with this message from our sponsor.
It's Cooper! Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt. That cute and fluffy puffball tail, Cooper, we do, yeah. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With a wiggle butt.
Gaga Grumps says okay wiggle madness over let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Chris in the house. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Q. Gaga Grumps says he didn't even predict it. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says I magicked it.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Todd_9 behave or walk out.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q, please X set. Gaga Grumps says is it still quest? Gaga Grumps says quest you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout. Wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Oh no. Wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says we love wipeouts X set. Gaga Grumps says we celebrate them in this room.
Grumps says stop spamming, guys.
Gaga Grumps says radio fits. Gaga Grumps says yellow A and D in need of homes.
Grumps says at Crystal welcome back.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says at X set A1 by.
Gaga Grumps says leave so soon X set. Thanks for coming.
Misk Elanias says hi, it's precious.
Benjamin is in the house.
Crystal says that Grump's sire fell off law.
Victor Kruger says bland.
Misk Elanias says bland.
Gaga Grumps says Marcella in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at misk_Ella_Neas hire, new name or account.
Miscellaneous says at Grump's new name.
Gaga Grumps says oh for heaven's sake. People changing their names on me. I'm old Doncha no lol.
Grumps says at Crystal from Live or Chair.
Gaga Grumps says bland works. Gaga Grumps says hi precious lol.
Miss Gelanias says sorry.
Misk Elenius says gland. Victor Kruger says gland.
Crystal says at Grumps both lol.
Gaga Grumps says we end in land and nearly a wipeout to fireworks.
Grumps says at Crystal at least you're properly awake now. And the neighbors, too.
Gaga Grumps says looks like a gland is only option.
Victor Kruger says I
Good
wear
game.
the crown.
Crystal says at Grumps, I need coffee.
Gaga Grumps says and that ladies and gentlemen is why we love wipeouts lol. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
A random star chosen by fate. Play a part, it's a live date. A Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says at Crystal I can only offer a pot of Earl Grey in these trying times.
A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says yes it's posted on my page active.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Crystal says at Gaga and Grumps first time I had a wipeout I was scared to ever pick a stating word.
Gaga Grumps says but wipeouts usually make the game easy lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says Q again. Welcome Dark Vibe Master
Crystal
to Wordle
says
with
at
Gaga.
Gaga and Grumps, yes, they do.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins
Gaga
don't
Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E, please, Victor. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Sade.
Victor Kruger says early.
Gaga Grumps says early you got.
Miss Galanias says Foyer.
Victor Kruger says Buyer.
Gaga Grumps says yellow ER and Y in need of homes.
Stain says Buyer.
Gaga Grumps says foyer fits. Crystal says rhyme. Gaga Grumps says we're ending year.
Miss Galanias says Buyer.
Crystal says Buyer.
LL Creative One says buyer. Gaga Grumps says buyer still works.
Victor Kruger says dryer.
Niscalanius says dryer.
DVP says Shire.
Gaga Grumps says dryer is a good shout.
The creative one says dryer.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says dryer to test pattern. Might need a filter then. Gaga Grumps says nope, dryer it was.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome,
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the
Gaga
scene.
Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it.
Miss Galadea says at Green, this is not Daily
Game
World.
Gremlins, come and let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grumps says this isn't today's Wordle and spoiling it gets me muted.
Now tap that screen.
Crystal says well hate though, but is that fun?
Now tap that screen.
Miss Galanese says Wordle.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says have a good day Crystal.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Crystal says at Gaga and Grumps you too.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says at Crystal off to the salt mines. Hey hi, hey ho.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Crystal says at Grumps, have a great day.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C.
Grumps says at Crystal you too, knock them all out.
Crystal says OMG there is the C. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says lol too late Crystal.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please Lecky. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart stain.
Stain says you're welcome.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says TikTok is terrible at counting, especially if you use clickers.
Grumps says that we have no control over how many taps TT counts.
Gaga Grumps says no we don't do today's in the live, do not spoil it for other.
Grumps says it no, we never play the word of the day, avoid spoilers.
Gaga Grumps says Lecky, do you have a word for us? Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered try, I'd like word. Gaga Grumps says going with crate.
Stain says cream.
Gaga Grumps says we've had cream as fireworks today.
Misk Elania says sharp.
Stain says well.
Gaga Grumps says Green A moved into number 3 Wordle Street R needs a home.
Stain says rainy.
Gaga Grumps says shark fits.
Miss Galanias says award.
Gaga Grumps says R moved in next door to A. Gaga Grumps says award works.
Stain says nice.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says award for fireworks.
Good day.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. O or AQ without a tail. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts beat flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says Chris back on top.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with O please Chris. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart secret. Gaga Grumps says Orion you got. Gaga Grumps says as I feared. Proper name.
Miss Galania says Olive.
Gaga Grumps says ozone instead. I guess it's in the sky too lol.
Miss Alania says house.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 5A needs a home. Gaga Grumps says needs AA Misk.
Misk Alania says Noah.
Gaga Grumps says no, it's a no Gaga.
Thanks for the follow.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Gaga is Gaga.
We would be honored
Melagoming says
if
hey.
you would join us.
Stain says dodge.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Miller in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Milargaming says at Gaga and Grumps Heya.
Gaga Grumps says O lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Or Creative One says dodge.
Miss Galanias says voice.
Milargaming says lodge.
Gaga Grumps says going lodge cause don't feel the double D.
Secret says voice.
Level up.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Malargaming says level 6.
It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee.
Gaga Grumps says
Level
love
up.
fireworks.
Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay.
Stain says gut feeling. Well done.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Miss Kelania says at Milargaming.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Miller's level up coming up.
Miss Gelanius says Grumps with the gift of badge level up.
Gaga Grumps says did you level up or will level up sticker sent for game?
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong.
Gaga
guessed
Grumps
it
says let's do a level up.
Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, seriously, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked.
Grumps says never a bad time for a level up dance.
New fandom level streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says and see Gaga is Gaga today. Already forgot Misk is precious FFS.
Miss Kelanius says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says it's one of those days.
A creative one says, did you see my level up, Gaga?
Misk Alania says it'll change it back in 7 days.
Gaga Grumps says no creative. Let's go again.
Guessed it wrong, you guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle, so
BL some VX. C says treasure box reminder.
Level up.
Level up.
BLO Zombie XE says WOHHH.
BL Osambi XD says treasure box reminder.
Gaga Grumps says, are you calling me an airhead Grumps?
Benjamin is in the house.
A creative one says, oh, the hot air balloon has to follow for two.
Gaga Grumps says Blossom in the house.
Grumps says would I ever?
BLO Som VXC says at Grumps here.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the reminder, treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ top of the evening to you.
Gaga Grumps says okay, let's get this game on the road.
BLO Som VXC says at Grumps lol.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Belusam VXZ says someone's spoiling the word today.
Miss Galanias says at Roman this is not daily Wordle.
Bull Zero Som VXC says at Missy _Ella Nia Safar.
BLO Som VXC says the word Teddy I was expecting to be harder. Melargaming says Bouvi.
BLO Som VXC says, I didn't mean to.
Osam VXZ says at BL0SS, VXV shush.
Grumps says Roman is taking a time out to reflect on their actions.
BLO some VXC says I'm going.
Usam VXZ says I'm so sorry.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. V.
BLO some VXZ says, I swear I was meant to say today.
Some VXZ says I'm so sorry.
BLO Som VXG says I swear.
BL some VXZ says MS or RY.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ the public flogging shall take place after the show.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Osam VXZ says goddamn sweet for saying the word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thorn. Tap and don't stop, like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says creative back on top your word starting with V, please creative.
Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ calm down.
Creative 1 says value.
Gaga Grumps says value you got. Gaga Grumps says no problem Megan.
Grumps says at Megan Ashley rocks calm down, come play.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow you in need of a home.
Miss Alanier says murky.
Stain says tutor.
Gaga Grumps says I like murky. Gaga Grumps says U moved into number 2 and Y into 5.
Stain says pudgy.
Gaga Grumps says putty works.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle says nope.
Miss Calanier says buggy potty fuzzy funny bunny sunny. O Creative One says at RAYHX is 6 letters.
Gaga Grumps says funny is in the grid. If it gives us nothing, we will need a consonant-heavy guess.
Miss Calanias says fuzzy.
Stain says fuzzy.
Miss Calanias says or fussy.
Miss Galania says zesty filler. Gaga Grumps says I see fussy and fuzzy. Are there any non-double letter words we're missing?
O Creative One says fuzzy.
Gaga Grumps says fudgy. We need a filter.
EUANN01 says fubby.
Miss Elenius says fudgy, not a solve.
Grumps says at TIFWeb 3R is rules out.
O Creative One says goads.
Gaga Grumps says why is fudgy not a solve?
Yuano1 says fubby, please, 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 Gaga Grumps.
Miss Calanier says fudge is not fudgy.
Oscar says zesty filler.
Gaga Grumps says no point begging, we're doing a filter to find out for sure. Gaga Grumps says we don't like to lose.
Grumps says at UNO. One, we don't throw things at the wall to see what sticks, we play tactics.
Miss Galania says guys stop spamming.
Gaga Grumps says can't be funky, stop spamming.
Miss Galania says zesty filler.
Esther My Shayla says fuzzy.
Grumps says it, I say what?
Book Creative One says good S for filter.
EUANNO1 says fubby.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says fuzzy it is.
Esther My Shayla says fuzzy.
Good game.
Miss Elenia says fuzzy says.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. J. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with J, please, Chris. Gaga Grumps says Jello you got.
Miss Galania says, okay, Chris, what's the secret I give up on these taps?
Gaga Grumps says yellow E and O in need of homes.
Miss Galania says mower.
Gaga Grumps says I find drumming my fingers works for taps lol. Gaga Grumps says all 5 fingers at once lol. Gaga Grumps says mower fits. Gaga Grumps says we have ourself an air trap.
Miss Elania says, at Chris Marvin yes I seem to get so far then I disappear off list.
Gaga Grumps says no filler until after guest 3. Gotta at least try for fireworks lol.
Miss Galania says toner.
Gaga Grumps says toner works. Gaga Grumps says will it accept tab revisions lol.
Misk Elania says hover cover poser poker joko foyer.
Gaga Grumps says it does. Helpful.
Miss Galania says hover.
Gaga Grumps says yep I think that leaves us one option only.
Miss Galania says just hover.
Gaga Grumps says are we playing too slowly for you user? Lol.
Misk Elania says great filler.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says I do love a good vowel rest filter.
Welcome, gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Miss Alanias says a bank had some manners.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Game gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily
Gremlins
heart.
on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Grumps says at UNC you're welcome to walk out. Let me show you how.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Miss Melanie said manners are free, guys. Be respectful at all times.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Grumps says at Dart_fan 2013 higher.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. N. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be
Grumps says at TKFL you were a day late with your attempt to spoil. Do it again and you're out of here.
fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat flying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Vortex cool.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with N please TKFL.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says no law says you have to tap. Gaga Grumps says never you got.
Grumps says it's summer welcome
Benjamin
back.
is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says summer in the house.
Summer says at Grumps, hey you okay?
Gaga Grumps says a green E lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Grumps says it's summer keeping busy. Yourself.
Summer says at Grumps, yaing alright I guess.
Grumps says it's summer people annoying you.
Gaga Grumps says how about melee for guest 2?
Summer says at Gaga and Grumpsery.
Grumps says make a meal out of it.
Summer says at Grumps ya kinda.
Summer says petty.
Gaga Grumps says why moved into number 5.
Grumps says it's summer glare at them till they back down.
Gaga Grumps says petty fits.
Summer says that Grumps will do.
Gaga Grumps says T moved into 4. Summer says hefty.
We would be honored.
Gaga Grumps says hefty is a good shout. Gaga Grumps says or not. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart summer.
Summer says Sword get the DSNW out the way.
Gaga Grumps says okay filter needed for Zesty and Deity.
Grumps says it's Seb higher.
Gaga Grumps says sword is good.
Summer says if this is a wipeout I'm done.
Kian Ella says zesty.
Kin Ella says dusty.
Gaga Grumps says no sword isn't it tells us deity or esty but not zesty or bestie.
Summer says that Uxno stop spamming, give her a chance.
Miss Calanier says snide fella bestie not a solve.
Miss Calanier says deity send.
Gaga Grumps says deity it is.
Good game.
It's playtime!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play?
Gaga Grumps says excellent filter work today chat.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, Gaga, Gaga,
Gaga Grumps says doo to Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says you probably spoiled today's Wordle Alex we instant mute for that. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says that or spamming. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says he got one.
Miss Elania says great guess Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Q.
Summer says Grumps got his letter.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says a tilde less than carrot. Z-I-E-N-N-A. Carrot greater than tilde no.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join.
Summer says Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says Summer reached the top and Grumps stole the crown.
Blossom VXC says hello.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart blossom. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q please Grumps.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps finally my likes freeze and I finally got at the top and he stole it.
BL0SSOMVXZ says I'm back after my crisis. Grumps says quiet. BL0SSOMVXZ says key. Grumps says it's some oopsies.
Gaga Grumps says quiet you got.
Summer says at Grumps I was gonna ask you for a word starting with Q anyway, TBF.
Grumps says it Chris Marvin tapped through it.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow E in need of a home.
Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says at Summer that's what you say now.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says ocean fits.
Summer says it Grumps no honestly, I was gonna ask you for a Wordle.
Gaga Grumps says E and the live in 3 and 4 Wordle Street.
Grumps says at Summer oh dear.
Blow Zombie XE says dream.
Summer says at Grumps so mean.
Gaga Grumps says DreamWorks. Gaga Grumps says added a homeless R.
BL0SomeVXZ says Bleer.
Grumps says at summer I did not think you were mean. Miss Galania says sheer.
Gaga Grumps says spear is a good shout.
Summer says it, Grumps. No, I don't mean me, I mean Yoru.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Wordle with Gaga, will the fireworks fly? A random star, chosen by fate. Play your part, it's a live date.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Grumps says at summer now you were just mean.
Summer says at Grumps, I've been in the live 20 minutes, and I've already been cheered up.
A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says is summer being mean to Grumps? In here for that haha.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Thanks for the follow. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Summer says it, Gaga and Grumps.
We would be honored if you would
Grumps
join
says
us.
at summer that's good to hear. May it stay with you for the day.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Summer says at Grumps, thank why oh you.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Assess hey there.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Alf.
Grumps says it higher.
Says do stare.
Assess stare.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. U.
A says unfold.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Assess until.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. A says until.
says until.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
A says a says a says.
It says until.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with U, please, Chris.
Jelen1 says I sent 330, why didn't I win? Summer says Gaga, my likes are freezing again, and Grumps is so me and stealing it from me.
Gaga Grumps says don't spam Alf, it doesn't get your word used.
Says sorry.
Gaga Grumps says because TikTok doesn't count all clicks. Gaga Grumps says unlit you got.
Grumps says it's summer, I would never.
Gaga Grumps says White House in the chat. Geolin1 says smile.
Says stare.
Jelen1 says drift.
Summer says it Grumps.
Says Angel.
Says Gay Bonus.
Summer says graph.
Gaga Grumps says can't be drift or angel. Gaga Grumps says graph fits. A says house. Gaga Grumps says nearly a double. 9 letters wiped. H needs a home.
Jelen1 says here's.
Summer says at know you.
Gaga Grumps says can't be house. Gaga Grumps says bye TKFL, thanks for coming. Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle.
Says hurry.
Gaga Grumps says there is no U for house or hurry.
Jelen1 says happy.
Jelen1 says hatch.
Says Gay Boner.
Gaga Grumps says we start with CH and E needs a home.
Assess Gabe owner.
As says Gabe owner.
Says Gabe owner.
Gaga grumps says can't be cheese.
Says dildo.
Jellin 1 says chair.
Gaga grumps says me too, Chris.
Summer says it shut up, mate.
Jellin 1 says check out.
Giolin 1 says check out.
Jellin 1 says check.
Jellin 1 says check.
Gaga grumps says check works.
It's playtime! Gaga's in the box! Don't let her lose!
Gaga grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those
Summer says in Ghana go will be in the live tomorrow.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team
Gaga grumps says let's fit in one last game.
Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you
Gaga grumps says see you tomorrow Sunday. Grumps is on phone, but we'll say bye to him too.
Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga grumps says hi Chris.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps thank you by tell him I said I think his name.
Gaga grumps says he is mean. Gaga grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Summer says okay, fine, I will stay. For the last one I might as well.
Jill 1111 says jokes.
Gaga grumps says I agree Summer you might as well. Gaga grumps says we are starting with A. J.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with J, please, Chris. Gaga Grumps says Okadokes Jello you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
Gaga Grumps says we're ending with a wipeout.
Esther Michela says brain.
Summer says graph.
Esther Michela says brain.
Gaga Grumps says brain fits. Gaga Grumps says 9 letters out of the game. R needs a home. Gaga Grumps says Rusty works. Summer says it Grumps hello again. Gaga Grumps says not fireworks today.
Grumps says at Summer rejoice, for you behave returned.
Gaga Grumps says can't be crude.
Grumps says for I have. What a weird autocorrect. It knows you be mean to me, I suppose.
Summer says that Grumps I still think are mean.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle usually, but don't Spurs usually come in pairs?
PH7 says usurp.
Gaga Grumps says Ellie I'm debating with myself.
Grumps says at Summer yeah. You just like picking house.
Gaga Grumps says PH7 in the house.
The creative one says crust.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Summer says it Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says usurp is better.
Well, Creative One says crush.
Grumps says usurp. Fancy words for the final game, A.
Gaga Grumps says no Spurs. Gaga Grumps says can't be crush doesn't live there. Gaga Grumps says nice catch.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says can't be crush.
Thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says shrug.
Gaga Grumps says shrug is a great D shout.
Summer says if Grumps gets this I will stop being mean to him.
Gaga Grumps says ouch.
Grumps says scrum then.
Gaga Grumps says ha.
A Creative One says scrub.
Summer says Oop looks like him not gonna stop.
Grumps says it ill creative one no B.
Gaga Grumps says all I see is scrum. Gaga Grumps says no B no T.
Good game.
Grumps says at, no T.
Good game.
Well, Creative One says I see now.
Grumps says it's scrum.
Gaga Grumps says saved by the Grumps. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps says it's on a heart.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Summer says it Grumps. A random star chosen
Grumps says wanted Scrum but didn't believe an American game was used.
Eggs and Bacon says, I just joined and you're going.
Summer says buying.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.